Right,
So,
off we go.
all right then. How are you, young man?
Not too bad. Sick of this lockdown, bored.
You been doing much?
I'm in the over 70s vulnerable, so it's more of a pain in the arse than normal.
Oh yeah, of course. I forgot about that.
I'm 74 now, so she has to keep me chained up, the missus now, so nothing unusual about that though, but I have been out a few times, but it's hard, it's hard.
Have you been
Getting
amusing
fed up
yourself?
with it now.
Have you been amusing yourself at all?
Well, I'm mainly reading, watching movies, been playing the guitar far more than normal. I've even improved a bit.
So we're going to get the solo. We're going to get the lockdown solo album then.
Nah, no, that ain't going to happen. I don't think. No.
That's one question.
But I've been going back. Playing over stuff that I used to play when I first started, way back in the late 50s. So I've been doing that really.
But what's your song of choice when you pick a guitar up? What do you go for?
Oh my God, it's different every day. I've got a collection now of old standards. I've got a collection of guitar stuff there, and so I play along with that a lot.
You do your jazz stuff still?
Yeah, a lot. That's how I started playing, really, when I first went to, learn some basic chords. My mum knew a bloke in Walsall. You're from Walsall, ain't you?
Dudley Fields.
Oh, you're from Dudley Fields? Oh, my word, okay.
Sneedle Road.
Oh, okay, blimey. You're around the corner from Bilbinell then, yeah.
Yeah.
When my mum was looking round to see if there's anybody could teach me a few chords, there was a guy in Walsall. He was a jazz player who she used to go and watch his band way back in the 40s. And he played just like Django Reinhardt, and he was a absolutely fantastic guitar player. And he used to play all the pubs around Walsall. And he ended up owning a pub in Brown Hills years later. And she said, will you show our Neville a few chords, like? And he lived on the Allenwell, which most of you won't know, but he knows the Allenwell. And I used to go over there every Monday night, take my guitar on the buzz. I had a semi-acoustic. It cost about £8 from a junk shop in Karma. And he used to teach me a few chords, and that's where I latched on to people like Django Reinhardt and Stefan Grappelli, because probably the first thing he showed me, the first song he probably taught me properly, other than chords, was Sweet Georgia Brown. Yeah. And I learnt that, and I thought I'd achieved some of them when I learned Sweet Georgia Brown. And I still play it today. Still play it today, Sweet Georgia Brown.
Was that one of the
That was
Degvilles?
nostalgia for me.
Yeah, was that one of the Degvilles?
The Degville, yeah, Freddie Degville. And his son
Paul. I've been looking at stuff this week, and I think his brother George, the Burt Whedon of Walsall.
Was he? I didn't know George. I knew Freddie.
He was described as, in 1962, as the Burt Whedon of Walsall. Brilliant.
But his son played. His son started to play exactly the same year as me, Paul. He's now passed on as well. But he started to learn the same time as me, late 50s. And he became a jazz player, a very good jazz player, Paul did. He used to play the pubs. He used to play the trumpet now and again, Paul Degville, in Bilston.
Yeah. Right. We better start off with some of the questions, if that's okay, Nod.
Go on.
Are you aware that this week's the 40th anniversary of Reading?
I am. Lots of people have let me know that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we had loads of questions, obviously, and obviously the story of it's pretty well known about last minute replacement and all that. So we know that, but a lot of people have been asking when you came off stage and the next day how you felt about it.
I didn't feel much different to what we normally felt after gigs. I mean, for me, Reading, I know we went to Storm and that,
Yeah,
But we
yeah.
always went to Storm at gigs. So it wasn't really, the impact didn't hit me probably till
No.
a week later or something, when we saw all the press and stuff like that. I mean, obviously we were chuffed to go down so well, because we didn't know what to expect. It was a brand new audience in our minds when we arrived there, this new sort of heavy metal audience there. So we didn't know what to expect, because around that time we'd been described, of course, as boring old farts. We'd had our day. So we really didn't know what to expect. But Tommy Vance had come into the dressing room, the caravan, and said, "Oh, you're gonna kill them today. You're gonna knock them dead." And we said, "Well, we don't know whether the audience will know the songs or whatever." And they did. And we went an absolute storm. But coming off, we'd been given an encore. You never get an encore at a festival unless you're top of the bill. And we've been told no encores, you stick to your time, blah, 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 which is what happens at every festival. And we come off to such an ovation that the promoter who was on the side of the stage with Chaz said, "You've got to go back on, you've got to go back on." So we toddled back on and did an encore and come off. And we knew we'd gone down great, but to me, I'm just talking personally, we always went down great, so I didn't have any different feeling on that day, really. Next day, felt just the same. Good gig last night, fair enough. But it wasn't until later in the week when we saw the press and the records started being played and that, and it obviously turned our career around. So that was the impact it had, but it wasn't I wouldn't say it happened when I come off stage and the next morning. The only bit I liked about coming off stage, well, it was very nice to go down so well. We went to the caravan and Britt Eklund was sitting there. So that was all right. That showed we'd got up a few steps from where we'd been a couple of years before.
I hope she paid for a ticket. Well, continuing Reading, I've got to ask you sorry about this. Was it taped? Was it the cameras there, and you can see the photographs and there's cameras pointing at you? Did anybody take a feed off those cameras at all?
As far as I know, it was filmed, yeah, as far as I know. The Beeb recorded it, the BBC got the audio, they own the audio, but as far as I know, it was filmed. I've never seen the film. I don't know who owns the film, but it was filmed. Everybody tells me it was filmed. I mean, you never know when you're there, you see. We'd only turned up on the day about an hour before we went on. We didn't know any of the technical side of things. The only thing we knew was Reading at that time was always audio recorded by the Beeb for the rock show. So we knew that was going to happen. Well, we didn't know we were going to be recorded, but we assumed we were, but nobody told us whether we were or whether we weren't. But of course, we were broadcast afterwards, so obviously the audio was recorded. As far as I know, I've been told there is a film in existence of the gig.
But you don't know where or when?
I don't own it, we don't own it. And I've never seen it, so I don't know what quality it is or whatever.
Because that sort of, the taping thing leads back to the Earl's Court thing, which was, the film there is just not very good at all, is it?
No. Well, I don't, with Earl's Court, you see, there again, it's another technical thing that we have no control over. Chaz said, we're going to record and film the gig.
Yeah.
And we said, oh, great, that's fine and dandy. I think what happened, he brought in the Rolling Stones mobile studio to record the audio. And as far as I can gather back then, I think the film people and the audio people didn't realise what the Slade audience was like. They got it all set up technically where you would normally film for a gig. But of course, when we walked on, all hell broke loose. The audience charged the stage. The cameras and all the audio equipment and all that just went to the wall, really. So the actual only camera that was working was the long distance camera, sort of at the back of the hall. So they got a long shot, But all the others, the close-up stuff, and that was all,
Yeah.
the kids just stampeded over the cameras and the audio. And so what I've seen of the footage, it's not good quality.
No.
You see, that gig, Girls Court, was never a rock gig until we did it. Bowie had jumped in the week before us, even though we'd booked it first. And Bowie had a horrendous time there, sound-wise and everything. He got really slated. People forget that. But he got really slammed. But we benefited from that because we knew then from his gig what the audio problems would be. And we put baffles in and everything to try and dampen the sound down a bit because it was never used for rock and roll. Afterwards, it started to be a regular venue. But then we had to deal with that sound problems, the acoustic problems, and nobody got used to venues of that size. Nobody indoors in UK had ever done a place that size. 18,000 in Earl's Court. The biggest venue prior to that people had done indoors was Wembley Arena, which was only 9,000 or 10,000. So you're talking double in Earl's Court, pretty much. Yeah. Well, nobody had experienced that in UK. We'd played stuff in America that size before, but not in control of the PA. So we were like learning as we went along. But from what I've seen of the footage and heard of the audio, it was not up to scratch. Visually, I mean, it was just, there was no close-up, nothing.
So even though it's in bad condition, it exists somewhere though?
It's not a case of bad condition, it's a case of, it's not a very good, stuff. It doesn't show the performance to its full extent.
Because all this again leads to the Slade thing about unreleased material. This is just me speaking personally. Slade seems to be the only group who've ever existed that there's no outtakes, there's no second take, there's no extra tracks for LPs. You'll go and get Chicory Tip's greatest hits, and it'll include, not to offend Chicory Tip fans, but you can. But Slade, there's nothing. I mean, Flame, I'm off tangent. Flame, you recorded Flame in one take. The pigeon crapping on your head, did it in one take. Nothing,
But that was the thing with a lot of the recording. You see, you have to remember the bands that you're probably talking about, like Chicory Tip or whatever it may be. They'd be like, maybe taking 10, 20 takes on a track. Yeah. We didn't work like that. If we had two takes, and then third take, no. If it weren't working by the third take, no, go off and we'll do it another day. So it was one of them. So basically, most of our material was done in 2 takes. I mean, I've had fans coming up to me for years. Why haven't you released all this? They seem to think there's a big magical cave somewhere that's full of unreleased material, and it's not true. We've not been together for 30 years. I don't know where all this stuff that's been released in the last 30 years, the bits of extras we have had and added to, there is not a magical cave where there's lots of unreleased material. I don't know where all these myths come from, and I know people blame me and say, oh, Noddy, stop this being released, Noddy, stop that being released. But it's just not true. There is no material. There's the odd tracks that may be demo tracks that we did, or just knock up having a bit of fun in the studio to get the sound. But nothing, no completed tracks have we still got that are unreleased. I mean, the band 30 years defunct now in the case of the 4 of us. Yeah. And most of our stuff has all been released over the years. And when we were releasing albums, what we used to do, because of the time structure, we used to do an album in under a month, mixed as well. And there was not lots of outtakes. And what there was ended up being used anyway in various forms, either on albums or whatever it may be. But there was nothing unreleased as such. The stuff that didn't go on the album went on the B-side. And that was always that was the way our career went, really. And if we were stuck for stuff, the B-sides went on the albums as well, because we were under so much pressure in those days. You had to have 3 singles at least, and 4 some years, every year, and an album a year as well, which we did. Plus touring, in our case, which could be, most bands didn't tour to the extent we did in that time. We had to fit it all in, and all the TVs, all the promotion tours, all that had to be done in a year. So we didn't have time to spend doing loads of takes and loads of tracks that were unusable or never got used. We just didn't have the time to do it. We were a day-to-day band, bang, bang, bang them out. That was the pressure from Chaz and the record company. We didn't particularly like it like that, but that's the way you had to do it in them days. Plus on the road, you know, you had to, it was night after night after night, gig, 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 gig. That's the way it was in them days. So
we can
people thinking there's this magic cave full of unreleased stuff. There ain't. I know lots of people say, "Oh, what about this? What about that? What about t'other?" and blame me for not bringing it out. But if I thought there was great stuff there, I'd obviously bring it out. But you know, as a legacy sort of thing.
Good.
I think we've nailed that one then.
One thing I'd say very quickly is if you've listened to the Beatles anthology, a lot of the Beatles anthology is the Beatles with the pants down. And I think that if there was stuff that you had anywhere and it wasn't up to scratch, not putting it out sometimes is a really good idea.
Correct. You got it. You've hit the nail on the head. Sometimes bands bring stuff out, and to me, it spoils it. I remember listening to some outtakes. I'm trying to think who it was. I think it was Free, the band Free. And they did a remix album, hits remix album. I don't know who remixed it. It was way after Free had finished. And I bought it because I was a big fan of Free. And I went and bought this hits album. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And I listened to it. And I thought, this just does not sound right. It's not the hits. It's not the mix of the hits. And I was so disappointed. The Byrds, the same. I bought a Byrds album that was all the hits. And it was just new mixes. And it don't work. It's not got the magic that the original things had. That's the trouble.
Yeah.
Well,
I definitely would not release anything, not in this far on anyway, that was below par. No. Absolutely nothing. There is absolutely nothing I would release unless it was A1.
Right. Thank you for that. It sort of hopefully stopped people asking you the same questions, which
I understand. I understand the frustration. Like you're saying, Chicory Tip had loads of spare tracks, you know, but we ain't drinking Chicory Tip.
It could have been Pilot. I don't know, you know.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean, and I know the fans get frustrated by it. Yeah, good one. I know they get frustrated by there's not this wealth of material that was never released, but we didn't work that way. We really didn't. It was get stuff done fast.
I think because this is going, the question thing's going slightly to what's it. We'll get on quite a good question about the Slade biography. There's supposedly, well, you can look on Amazon and the new Slade biography.
Oh, the new one that's supposed to be coming, yeah.
Is coming out. Don's been interviewed, and so other people have as well. I'll just read the actual question. It said, the Chris Charlesworth book in the 80s seems to be the only official biography that all the band took part in.
And okay, by the way, that was the only authorised biography.
Yeah,
was
exactly.
Chris Charlesworth.
Now,
we all got interviewed separately at Jim's insistence. Jim wanted it that way, which was a good idea. We all got interviewed totally separately. We all had to okay the book before it came out, which we did. So it was the only authorised biography, yeah. This new one that's coming out, or supposed to be coming out, I mean, it's been muted for years now, as far as I know. As far as I know, only Don's done an interview for it. And Don went ahead and did it without asking the other three of us whether it was authorised or not. He just went ahead and did it, which he really shouldn't have done. He should have consulted us to see whether it was going to be a proper authorised one.
Yeah. Well, I've got to ask you the question. There's a huge elephant in the room. Me and him next door. As you know, our book, the discography.
Okay.
We sent you a copy. Did you read it?
I did. I didn't read it from cover to cover, but I did skim through it.
Okay.
I'll tell you what put me off. What put me off? Not that it was a bad book. I'm not saying it's a bad book. But what put me off before I started is, you see, I hate things misquoted or putting in that are not there. And
right.
I always read a book on the back cover or the inset before anything happens. And in your particular book, I read on the back that all the 3 of us out of 4 didn't want to do Merry Christmas. And that puts me off. When I see a quote like that, I think, well, the facts are not there.
That came from Jim.
Well, you could take Jim's
got his own version
if you want to. But I mean,
yeah.
if you want to put something like that on the cover of the book, okay, put it inside if that's what you think's the truth, as it were. But you don't put it on the cover to plug your book without consulting the other 3 whether we wanted to do Merry Christmas or not. I mean, if Jim's saying the other 3 of us didn't want to do it, well, quite frankly, the chorus of it was "Buy Me a Rocking Chair," which was my song. I wrote all the lyrics to the song. You know, why would... and I went away when we sorted the melody out the day we were deciding to do a Merry Christmas song. And I went away that night and went to the trumpet and wrote all the lyrics that night. Why on earth would I say, well, I'm not doing it, when I went right away and wrote the lyrics? But I mean, if you want to take Jim's word for it, that's up to you. But you have to consult the other... There's 4 members in the band.
I don't...
I think, as I remember, Dave was in trepidation of doing it or bringing it out, but he wanted a rock record out, you see. I mean, but he's the only one I can remember who had any cause to, you know, maybe not jump right in and say, yes, we'll do it. But I know Jim said it. I know Jim said it, you know, that the other 3 of us wanted to do it. But he said a lot of things. But you either take that as a truth. That's up to you. You either take that as a truth or you don't. That's your choice.
Well, I mean, you're setting the record straight as well, now, so.
Yeah. This is it. That was... So we're not going to get a face-to-face when you're holding the book up saying, fantastic, mate. That'll do.
From what I saw of it, it was good. It was good detail and everything. It was good.
Yeah.
But you've got to remember, there's no such thing as a book written by other people that's unauthorised that's going to be 100% true. No matter where you get your facts and your research from. The problem is, and I know how difficult it is to write a book. Tell me about it. I know how difficult it is. And the thing is, you see, you guys, you have to rely on clippings mainly, don't you? Generally, you're going back on historical clippings in newspapers. I don't think I've ever done an interview in my life. Well, I would say 90% of the interviews I've done in my life have been 100% accurate. The stuff that's been printed that I supposedly have said.
Oh, right.
They're not always accurate. Or facts that you read about yourself or anything. That is the problem with having to research stuff. You don't always get 100% accurate picture from a review or anything like that. It's just people's opinion. It's people's opinion. The only thing you can trust is yourself. You know, it's the same whether you like a record or you don't like a record. You can only put out what you believe in, and you think, this might sell. You don't know. Sometimes you put a record out that 1 of the band don't like, 2 of the band don't like. The record company want to put it out. They want to push it. The manager might want to put it out. It's not always... There's always a lot of different factions coming in from all sorts. And in the case of Slade, it was always a majority vote within the band. Now, if 3 of us had voted not to do Merry Christmas, we wouldn't have done Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
You know, it would have been 3 against 1 if that would have been the case. It was never a case of if somebody hated it, one person, it would get done. But generally, the majority, it was a democratic band. And bands, I always say it's not a good thing in rock and roll to be a democratic band, because nothing gets bloody done. Or it takes months to get a decision. If you're a democratic band, it takes ages. Chaz used to put his foot down with us. I mean, quite a lot of times, Chaz would say, "You're doing it, and that's it." And we'd go along with it because we trusted in his judgment, whether we wanted to do it or not. He wasn't always right, but somebody had got to put their foot down. In the 80s, it was a different matter. We had a democratic decision, but trying to get a decision out of 4 members of a band who weren't always on the same page took a long bloody time sometimes, and sometimes you missed deadlines and all sorts of things. But that's the way it was, you know. But bands are a funny animal. All rock and roll bands are the same. They're all the same. It's, you know, Slade were no different.
Excuse me if I'm crossing questions off, because you're answering questions. No problem. I've crossed off the Merry Christmas one, and there's other things. So
okay. No problem.
No, it's brilliant. That's what we wanted. The noise was done with love. That's all I can say.
We tried.
I'm not knocking the book. No, don't for a minute think I'm knocking the book. I'm not at all knocking it. I'm not knocking it. From when I read through it, I picked on various things and looked, and it was good and it was well researched. But everything can't be accurate.
No, that's fair.
Even my books are not all. You can't, when it's printed up and edited and it goes to the editors, you know, things get changed or things get cut out because you've got too many words in, or they think the solicitors or the lawyers are going to have a pop at you. You know, it gets edited and whatever when you release it through a big publishing house. So even with your own work, you know, you can't guarantee that you're getting 100% what you wrote in the first place. Yeah. It's impossible. It's impossible.
No, that's great. That'll do for me. Do for you, Ian.
That's fine. We tried.
Yeah.
No. Don't think I'm slagging it. I'm not slagging it.
No. I mean, we tried with the book. We tried to do you justice.
You did do it justice because you got an accurate what do you call it? You went through chronologically everything we'd done record wise, which is great. I mean that's a lot of bloody work. I mean that's great to have that there as a reference point. It's fantastic, yeah.
And stuff's turned up after we published it.
I'm sure
stuff came out of the woodwork as well. So
that's what I mean. You see, you don't know. You see things. And things will probably turn up out the woodwork in future also, you know.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, one of the questions we got, one of the questions we had was, is there a studio version of In Like a Shot from My Gun or Darling Be Home Soon?
Darling Be Home Soon, definitely not.
Right.
In Like a Shot from My Gun, I don't think so. I don't ever remember us doing one in the studio.
Because
usually with things like that, if we played them in a live situation like we did for Slade Live, or they were in the set at that time, we usually didn't do them in the studio because they never sounded as good to us. We tried it with lots of tracks and they got scrapped. Going Back was a good example, massive on stage, the song Going Back. I don't know where you go back that far when we were seen as, before we were famous, we used to do a song called Going Back.
Yeah.
It was a big ballad on stage for us. We tried to put it down in the studio in the very early days. Couldn't get it down in the studio the same. Never worked the same. God knows why. Same with Darling Be Home Soon. Never worked the same. So now we never had a finish. We probably might have had a pop at it, but never got it down.
Right.
Well, let's see what we got. We got this. The questions tend to be things like how the physical thing of writing songs and how much input. Obviously, it's you and Jim. How much input Dave and Don had? You know, were they suggesting
in the arrangement,
drum fills and that sort of stuff?
Well, Well, obviously they had some input, yeah.
Yeah.
Jim would generally work out the arrangements on probably 80% of the stuff. He'd work out the basic arrangement, whatever, you know, what each of us was going to be playing on, not from the vocal point of view, but from the backing point of view. And we'd sort of go into a rehearsal room generally. We never made demos until the 80s. We made a couple of demos, but we'd go in a rehearsal room back in Warsaw, in Willenhall or whatever, and we'd run through the tracks and Jim would have a basic arrangement there. But then we'd have to translate it into us. Like Dave, he'd have his own style of playing, so he'd have to adapt the guitar parts to his style of playing. I'd have to adapt, you know, my parts to my style of playing, and the same with Don. And of course, you know, obviously Don would put his own, I mean, he was the drummer, he'd have to guide us on what drum pattern he would think would work best or whatever. But we'd always have to Sladeify it because although Jim had got the arrangement in his head, it had to be Sladeified. That's what being in a band is. You got to put them parts of the jigsaw together till it works. Sometimes it's gone.
No, it's just that somebody's asked about your guitar playing. Excuse me. If your rhythm guitar, nobody will argue with you playing rhythm guitar. You were sort of fantastic. As far as I'm concerned, I know nothing. It was fantastic.
I was regarded as when we first formed, we regarded as 3 lead players.
Yeah.
Because that was pretty much Dave's idea. He wanted 3 lead players, really. Yeah. And my previous bands, I'd been a lead player as well as the lead singer. I'd been a lead player as well. Yeah. So in our early incarnation, I was playing lead or we were playing double lead. Jim was more or less a bass lead player. So the riffs would be all 3 leads in harmonies or whatever on unisons. Yeah. But as the Slade sound developed, I became like the double up on the riffs and the rhythm player. But I mean, I was the best rhythm player in the band. I was from the rock and roll old school. You see, that was my thing. The old rhythm playing of the old 50s rock and rollers. That was my style. That's what I'd grew up on. So I fitted that into the band. I know what you're going to ask next. What happened in the 80s, are you?
Well, yeah, there is. Because you were appearing without a guitar.
I know. Well, the fact was in that, when it come to the mid-80s, like Jim kept telling us all that he could play all the guitar parts better, me and Dave's parts, but he couldn't play our style and he couldn't play our sound. He could play the parts because he's a good musician. But as far as the rhythm guitar parts were, mainly, there wasn't a lot of rhythm parts to play from probably Rogues Gallery on, certainly not. It was a lot of keyboards filled up the room of the rhythm part. So there wasn't really, the reason you saw me on telly without a guitar was like things like Mysterious Mr. Jones or something like that, because there's no rhythm guitar on it. It's keyboards and main guitar. Basically, that's it.
That was just weird seeing that.
I know it was weird, but I wasn't going to go on and sort of go, you know, I mean, Jim, well, we all had our own style of playing. I was a great rhythm player, you know, even other bands and told me, I'm not bragging. I mean, other musicians said, you're a great rhythm player, you know, and I was a great rhythm player. On stage, I proved it, as well as doing the riffs. I was a rhythm player and I was singing lead vocal at the same time. Yeah. So in a way, me and Don were the rhythm section, because Jim was a different sort of bass player, totally. He wasn't like a normal bass player. But in the 80s, this sort of dynamic changed for the sound, the production, everything else. And I wasn't needed on guitar, really. I didn't agree with it, but as I said, it was the decision of the majority. The majority thought this is the direction we're going in. To me, we lost our, what I call the rock and roll edge, the rough edge. It was the era of the CD era, So production was taking over, really. The production became, everything had got to be clean cut, everything had got to be recorded separately, which the first time we did that was My Oh My, where we actually recorded all separate, except for Merry Christmas, but that's a different story way back then. That was because of Don's accident. But in the 80s, we layered everything. John Punter came. When the record company said, we want to bring in another producer, but they brought in John Punter. And me and Jim had demoed My Oh My and Runaway at a little studio that I owned in London. We demoed it, just us two. No drums or nothing, just guitar, keyboards and voice. And because the record company wanted to hear the 2 tracks, and they wanted the producer to hear it. So we sent it to him. John Punter was chosen to be the producer. And when we went in, he had a totally different style. So we put the basic track down 3 times. Basic track. My Oh My was the first one to record. And then he put 3 pianos down, 3 lead vocals down, 3 guitars down, 3 basses down. That's how he recorded. And then he put a compilation of each instrument built up like that. That's how My Oh My was recorded. That's how Runaway was recorded. That's how Rose Gallery was recorded, in all triple recordings. Now, to me, that's not a rock and roll to me, but that is the way it was in them days. And he came out with 2 great big hit records for us. I personally think they could have been better, even though they were huge hits. I think they could have been better, because I don't think for a greater song and as great a production he did on them, to me, if you'd have put the Slade sound with that, the old Slade sound, the rock, you know, a bit of nitty-gritty rock and roll in there as well, you know, it might have been, it had more effect. But he got 2 great hits for us, so of course we were going to go with him for the next album. You know, record company wanted us to do that, and we did. But it wasn't all plain sailing on the Rose Gallery album. You know, Jim got upset with him over a lot of things, and you know, Rose Gallery was. I don't think he would have worked with us again after Rose Gallery, quite frankly. But we went along with it. Me and Dave went along with him because he'd given us success, and Dave was quite happy with him. For want of a better word, I had to soften up my vocal because they wanted a more radio-friendly approach to the vocals, which I did. You know, I still sang the balls off them.